he plays like the length feels like he's a 6'4" guy. I thought he has a great frame with the ability to stack on good weight still. He is unbelievably powerful. I thought he did show a level of acceleration that I was hoping to see from him, a level of toughness. I came away thinking this is a no doubt FBS player.
Hello and welcome to the Verbal Commitment Podcast here on the Kansas City Sports Network. I'm Kevin Flaherty. I'm here as always with my good friend Ryan Wallace, slightly worse friend this week for Sunflower Showdown reasons. And we're talking about the world of local recruiting from Kansas and Kansas City prospects to the college classes at Kansas, Kansas State, and Missouri. As I just mentioned, it's Sunflower Showdown week, and we'll talk about both schools' recruiting classes and teams heading into that rivalry matchup. But we also just saw another rivalry game with Great Bend pulling away from Hayes Lake for a 43-19 win in something that former K-Stater Marcus Watts called War on the Great Plains before the game in the pregame video. So that was pretty lit. We talked with Ian Premer, the top-ranked in-state player in 2026, and Cooper Ohnmacht, the top-ranked in-state player for 2027 after the game, and we'll play those interviews later on in the show. If you like what you're hearing, comment below, tell your friends about us, subscribe, hit that like button, or leave us a review, a 5-star rating, wherever you get your podcasts, like Apple or Spotify. We have our own specific audio channel through KCSN on Apple and Spotify, so you can seek us out there. As always, we appreciate you guys helping us to grow and getting us in front of more people like you. Ryan, let's go ahead and get an alarm.
I bet I can guess who this is for.
For those of you watching your first episode of Verbal Commitment, first of all, thank you for watching. And second, an alarm means that one of the local Power 4 schools landed a commitment. In this case, it's a big one, with Missouri luring 4-star defensive lineman Taj Overton into the fold. The Owasso, Oklahoma native visited Missouri, then decommitted from Oklahoma State a day later before committing to the Tigers a few days after that. Ryan, what is Missouri getting in Overton?
Yeah, well, I said I bet I can, guess who this is because, this is the only team it feels like that's getting commitments at the moment. For whatever reason that is. And let's be honest, like Missouri's class was a little bit slower out of the gate than K-State and KU. So we get it. But in terms of what they're getting, Kevin, I'm just going to be kind of brutally honest here. I go to throw on Taj Overton's tape. Hadn't really looked at it since I feel like I looked at him when he was a sophomore and maybe at the end of his junior year. And so for whatever reason, maybe my memory is off. But I see that he's like the number 1 ranked player in Oklahoma this year, and he's now number 2 in this Missouri class, according to 24/7 Sports. And I left feeling underwhelmed. I'm sorry, Tigers fans. I don't really know like where his fit is. If he's really 275, I see that maybe there's some agility there, but he almost looks under 275 to me. So like, is he an interior guy? He definitely doesn't look like your standard Missouri edge in terms of his length. So I think he's a interior D lineman, but he looks again like a guy that's going to need to put some weight on. All this to say, you see bits and pieces, some fractures there of like, whoa, there's some get off, there's some burst, there's some power here. He understands leverage, but also maybe a little bit further down the road than what you might expect from somebody that's, again, ranked number 2 in this class right now.
Overton is the number 28 defensive lineman and number 178 overall player, according to 24/7 Sports. And with this addition, Missouri now has 19 commitments, adding, as you referenced, a whopping 9 of those players within the last month. And at number 27, the Tigers are butting up against a top 25 recruiting class after a slow start. You might have heard from, just a second ago, but it's Sunflower Showdown week. So let's talk a little bit about the classes that Kansas and Kansas State have at this point. If there's one school that didn't have a slow start, it's the Jayhawks. Kansas prioritized making noise in state early on, with Wichita Northwest Jalen Mason picking the Jayhawks in the fall. But when Manhattan's J.J. Dunnigan picked Kansas right after New Year's, it started a run on Kansans, with the Jayhawks winding up with 7 among their 20 commitments, currently ranked at number 35 nationally. Ryan, what are your thoughts on Kansas's class to this point? And we'll kind of talk about maybe a strength or a weakness here as we see it.
Well, I think overall it's a class that we kind of expected Kansas to have entering the season, in terms of one that they really wanted the backbone to be getting back into the Sunflower State, right? Winning some legitimate recruitments against K-State. That was something that we previewed actually in the Sunflower preview show this time a year ago, talking about how 2026 might be that year for KU. And they turned that into a reality. I mean, they went out and they won J.J. Dunnigan. They won Hunter Higgins, Caden Snyder, obviously Josh Galbraith being in their backyard. Like, those were 4 right there that were very big wins for them. But I also really liked the evals here overall, Kevin. I think, we've talked about a guy like Drayden Punt is somebody that I really think a lot of. I think that is a kid that makes a lot of sense for what KU wants as an edge. Corey Amakari is a guy that I really like, and we'll get into that more later on in the show. But I mean, they went out, trusted their eyes, got some out-of-state kids early. Again, kind of got those kids into a package with a bunch of in-state kids that really want to play for KU. There's a meaning behind putting that uniform on. And I think that this has become a class that's really embraced KU from top to bottom. And then beyond that, Kevin, I love what I'm seeing them do here into the fall, going out and flipping a guy like KD Jones. And again, I think that's based on the relationship that they had, before he committed to Oklahoma State. But again, showing that, hey, we're going to develop relationships so that if we do have KD Jones kids that come onto the market, later than we expected, we can go right back out there and make quick work of that. So top to bottom, this is a really strong class. And I think it's got, again, a good mix of guys that you and I feel like might be able to contribute fairly early, and some guys that I feel like are, good projects to have with a lot of raw assets. A guy like Tyron Parker might not be ready right away, but boy, his upside for being a kind of a, if you want to call him a lower end guy in the class, pretty phenomenal.
I put strength for this class, Ryan, at defense. I just think, when you look at Drayden Punt, Hunter Higgins, the defensive tackles like Naquane Carter and guys like that, then you get to that second level with Credit and Galbraith, and you add a guy like J.J. Dunnigan on the back end. I really feel like that's where the strength of this class is on that defensive side of the ball. Weakness for me, offensive line feels like it's got some projects, and that's not that those guys won't pan out. I just think there aren't guys that you flip on the tape immediately and you're like, hey, this guy will play as a redshirt freshman, right? And that's tough to find. You're nitpicking at this point. But I do think that's a nit that I pick with this group is I think it's a solid offensive line class. But, you mentioned Corey Amakari and talking about it a little bit later. You'll see, a guy in that K-State class that I really like on the offensive line. But I think when you look at this class overall, I like the tight ends. You look at that group. Wide receivers, I like the potential of Tyron Parker. I think they've got some guys that fit in there. Running backs, like you mentioned, pretty good. I think Jalen Mason's a solid quarterback to build around. I think that offensive line group, there isn't sort of that guy that I realize he was a 5-star guy, but an Andrew Babalola or somebody like that, or even to that point, Ryan, a guy who's maybe your second or third guy in the class that's like a Brock Heath guy,
right.
I would love in that group. I think they have some guys that have some ability coming in that offensive line room, but it's really going to be up to them and to those players and the staff to develop those guys.
And, I liked what you said about the offensive line. Another position group for me, and again, it's not saying that it's a bad group. It's just an interesting group that they chose on to stick with. And I'll explain why I'm saying that is wide receiver for me. Because I do like Tyron Parker's upside, right? I do think that Corbin Glasgow has a role just in what he does. I think Nate Sims is very crafty. Like there can be a role for him, But for a team that, what I think Cam Pickett, right, might be the only guy that has eligibility remaining, right, that would come back of the current guys. So, you add Kubeka, sorry,
too as well, yeah.
But then, then you're looking at like Bryson Hayes from last year, Tate Nagy. There are guys that make sense from like, this is the one thing that they do well, right? But like, again, kind of talking about that like well-rounded receiver, this class feels like some guys that are still going to need some development, and probably a class that you're still going to need to go into the portal to find some guys that can be leaders and more dependable, at least in the early stages of, the 25 and 26 receivers careers, guys that can kind of, again, be a little bit more dependable while these young guys work themselves into where Lance Leipold and company want them to be.
As for K-State, the Wildcats have typically dominated in-state recruiting, but have just 2 Kansans committed currently. The 2 Kansans, we like both of them a lot. Mill Valley's LaMarcus Barber and Blue Valley West, Lawson McGraw. But there has been an emphasis on hitting other areas. And Ryan, you and I have talked about our faith in this Kansas State staff to go out and find guys regardless of where they're recruiting.
Yeah. No, I mean, they went out and Kansas State has made a living this year. We've talked about it on the show, had Greg Powers on a couple of weeks ago about the killing that they've made in Texas this year. You see 2 of the top 3 guys listed there in the graphic. Tucker Ashford and Keegan Collins are both Texans. And then they've gone into Colorado to get Maxwell Lovett and his teammate Oliver Miller over at Cherry Creek. So it's a group, Kevin, that I think is got a lot of potential. But the interesting thing for me in this class when it comes to Kansas State is, and we kind of talked a little bit about it with KU, but I actually think KU has a few more. And again, maybe I'll end up being wrong here, but you go down the list and there's not a home run like this kid could play as a freshman. I mean, maybe there's some guys that could surprise us, but you don't go down this list and say, man, you say, hey, this is a solid group, a group that I think does have some ability and some potential, but very little, I think, in terms of like contributions like we're seeing from the 2025 class with Logan Bartley, Lincoln Cure and others. I think this is a group that, again, might project as high, but I think more projects in this class for Kansas State, and still some areas that they really need to hit on, one of which is wide receiver. I talk about KU, and at least they're able to get wide receivers. I mean, you've got Maxwell Lovett, and there's some Jace Brown to him, at least in the way that he runs his routes and his size and the way that he moves. I don't know if he's got quite that level of speed, but you go watch Jace Brown's senior tape and you watch Maxwell Lovett's so far senior tape, and like, I like what I'm seeing, right? But they still need help at receiver. And I think, could still use some help, maybe a DB and especially interior D-line. And they're offering guys like crazy and are just not being able to hit on much of anything. So closing this class out for Kansas State, at least at the moment, seems to be a little bit of a struggle.
Strength, I wrote down offensive line. I mean, when Justin Morales is your 4th ranked offensive lineman, your offensive line class is pretty good. And that could also be that, hey, recruiting sites are missing on Morales a little bit. But I digress. But I do think that that's a really strong group in this class, Ron. I think that's a strength. Weakness, I just put playmakers outside of Lovett. I know you said wide receivers, but running backs, we both like Tiadeki as a quarterback, but he's not necessarily an Avery Johnson, Blake Barnett style runner. And so I think when you look at guys that are just going to be explosive with the ball in their hands, I think that's something that K-State could probably stand to add a little bit more of in this class as well.
Yeah, you kind of took the words out of my mouth in terms of like the strength. It has to be offensive line. I do really like, this is one of the better groups. And I've liked how K-State has recruited offensive line for several classes in a row now. It's kind of surprising the way that this year they've had to rely on some transfers because it just feels like guys aren't ready yet. That surprises me, honestly, because there have been so many guys that we've liked coming up the pike that maybe just haven't developed as quickly as we thought. but this is another class that I think is really, really strong. If there are some guys that might be able to contribute quicker than we think, it's probably on offensive line. And then when you think about the weakness for me, again, you described it like mellow. There's just good football players, like, but nobody that's like overly dynamic. And maybe that, is right up Kansas State and Chris Kleiman's alley. It's just good football players, but there isn't really anybody that you look at and you're thinking, man, he can be a staple piece, like at his position group. Guys that can be potential starters, potential contributors, but nobody that you're like, man, he's got all Big 12 written all over him. Very few, it feels like, of those guys in this class. Good class, solid class, balanced class, but not a lot of pizzazz, so to speak.
I get there a few years in, but you hear the way that Kansas this week has talked about trying to solve for Avery Johnson's legs, trying to solve for Dylan Edwards if they wind up facing him, trying to solve for Jace Brown, and then the way that Kansas State utilizes the tight end position. When you look at this class, I think that's the one thing where, coming out of high school at least and where they're at right now, it doesn't seem like they have those kinds of guys to get the ball to.
I was going to ask you real quick, just again, kind of summing up both classes.
Yeah.
What do we say? K-State is, kind of in the 50s, upper 50s, and KU's hovering somewhere in the mid 30s. Underrated, overrated, or do you feel like the industry as a whole is kind of nailing both of these?
Yeah, I think Kansas is maybe slightly underrated on a few guys. And I feel the same about K-State, actually. And I'm not trying to blow smoke up anyone's rear or whatever. I really like this offensive line class for K-State. And I think there are a couple guys within that offensive line group, and you may agree with me on this, Ryan, that I think could be 4-star guys, that I think, have that ability that, hey, the right scout sees them on the right day and that kid's got a 90 rating. And there are a couple guys like that in KU's class. We've talked about Josh Galbraith's athleticism. There aren't many linebackers in the country more athletic than Josh Galbraith is. We've talked about how Hunter Higgins moves differently, when he doesn't have a broken vertebrae that he's trying to play through. And he earned an 89 rating while playing through that back injury. And then guys like Joseph Credit that, we had Greg Powers on the show and he said, hey, I think this is an all Big 12 linebacker who maybe isn't getting that sort of love from a recruiting standpoint. There are guys in K-State's class that I feel the same way about, where, they're further down a little bit. Lawson McGraw is a guy that I think is probably a little bit underrated. LaMarcus Barber is absolutely underrated by the recruiting services. He's a guy that, Ryan, quite frankly, to me, he's in that 89-90 range where he could be a 4-star or at least a very high 3-star type of guy. And so with both of them, I think there's some semblance of them being underrated, and some of that, again, not trying to throw shade here, but some of that comes from the fact that you don't necessarily have people coming out to Kansas and seeing some of these guys.
Yeah, and I'll just finish real quick by saying similar. I think you could go down the list and say there are guys that we feel like are underrated or overrated. I mean, Joseph Credit to me on Kansas' side is a guy that's criminally underrated. Just like you mentioned, LaMarcus Barber being a guy that's underrated on Kansas State's side. I think they have Kansas probably right where they should be. I think this is a top 40 class, no doubt, teetering on maybe inching inside the top 30. With K-State, I feel like it's a little underrated, but I'm not thinking it's like by much. I think they're hovering right at like between 45 and 50 as opposed to 55 and 60. But again, I think it depends on if you're grading on, again, ceiling or floor. And it's kind of up to which industry ranking you're looking at and which guys you're talking to. But overall, I mean, I think pretty appropriate grades and, solid classes. But now we're kind of at that point now where this is where you make your class either, you tie that bow and you really put the cherry on top of it, or, it just kind of stays as it is, which for both of these classes would be fine. Portal and maybe even how you can snag one or two more in the high school ranks if you need them. That's what's going to kind of see, again, which of these classes can kind of make one last jump.
We've talked about it on the show before. For those of you who don't know, we do rate our guys a little bit differently. One of the ways that we do it is we do look at the ceiling that players have, but we also do a lot of work to find out the personality, talk to these guys, talk to their coaches, talk to people around them. And so we try to look at how likely they are to get to that ceiling as well. And that's also part of their ranking here on our show. We will be right back on the Verbal Commitment Podcast after this.
My name is Terrell Jolly. A lot of people call me TJ, founder and CEO of Integrity Capital Management. So Integrity Capital Management originally started out as a property management firm, but we slowly transitioned to what is described as an incremental development firm that's focused on situational housing. I know most people say affordable, but we believe in creating housing for people that are actually in need and built to the end user. I believe everyone needs a home because when you have home, you have hope. The reality is that when you're building a business, one thing you don't think about is like what a true banking relationship means. And, I had the honor and privilege of meeting Debbie early on in my career when I was just trying to get going. And as a small business, it's really challenging at times because people don't understand the concept or not believe the longevity because you're just getting started. But Debbie was willing to take a chance on me, be patient with me. I almost look at it like a grassroots initiative. She's seen and believe what I'm about. Anybody that's really true about their business and want to get some things done, I would definitely trust hands down Emprise because Deb's team, along with Aaron and Jackie and all the amazing people that work behind the scenes, even from the treasury side, I would say, hey, give them an opportunity because you won't be disappointed and you will actually be in hands that actually somebody care and that will see you from start to finish.
Welcome back to the Verbal Commitment Podcast. You can follow along with us on Twitter/X at verbalcommit_KC for clips from the show, conversations about local players, and even the odd highlight. And calling all Chiefs fans, you could be on the 50 inside GEHA field for the official coin toss at a Chiefs game this season. Visit Chiefs.com/GEHA now. Enter to win a chance to be on the field for a once-in-a-lifetime view of the pregame coin toss. Plus, you can score other exclusive prizes. Enter for a chance to win at Chiefs.com/GEHA. GEHA is a proud partner of the Kansas City Chiefs. We wanted to have some fun with the Sunflower Showdown, and so we asked ourselves 3 questions heading into Saturday's game. First, Ryan representing Kansas State and myself representing Kansas. Which player would we steal from the opposing roster? Second, if we could swipe one player from the other team's recruiting class, who would it be? And third, if we could convince each staff to take one more realistic player from the state of Kansas, who would it be? Let's start off with the trade talks here, Ryan. You decided to beef up that Kansas State defensive line with Kansas defensive tackle Blake Harrell, while I went with Kansas State tight end Lincoln Cure. So why don't you get us started? Why Blake Harrell?
I was trying to think of somebody here, Kevin, that again, if I'm making a trade, right, and we're making this trade right now ahead of Sunflower Showdown weekend 2025, I'm thinking of somebody that is going to kind of be of help right away, but also I was looking for somebody that gives the K-State roster something for future years. And it looks like you're doing the same with a true freshman. With Blake Harrell, I see a guy that's got multiple years of eligibility still left. I see a need fit for Kansas State in terms of, I mentioned kind of beefing up that defensive tackle room. Now that they're playing that 4-man front again, they have 2 guys out there more often. You're losing Damian Alalio at the end of this year. You're losing Uso Seumalo after this year. I think you bring in Blake Harrell, a guy that seems to have taken that next step this year. And I think at K-State could even take his game to another level if they wanted to. And that's not throwing shade. I'm just saying he fits a lot of the things that K-State embraces in terms of what a former walk-on, correct?
No,
not a former walk-on. Okay. Well, a guy that, again, maybe was underrated coming in, let's put it that way, on campus at KU. A guy that's got the Midwestern roots. I've heard Lance Leipold say he's a guy of few words that just goes about his business. I'm thinking K-State's saying yes, yes, yes. Like all these things just strikes me as a guy that, again, would fit in purple, would probably look good in purple. And again, a guy that I think an area that K-State needs for future years. So I know maybe not the flashiest take here. There were some other guys that I thought of, but Blake Harrell just seems to hit a lot of needs and would fit rather well in the K-State locker room, to be quite honest.
Yeah, and KU moves him kind of up and down the defensive line on their front. So, he's a guy that plays defensive tackle. They'll also bump him out to defensive end at times. And I think he's got all Big 12 potential. And so I do really like that pick. With Lincoln Kira, I mean, there's not really a whole lot I need to say here, obviously. He's a guy that Kansas went really hard after as a recruit. He's obviously a former 5-star player who's a terrific talent with a lot of athleticism. And Kansas is really utilizing the tight end right now. If you didn't watch that Texas Tech game, you might not have seen that Bowden Gruen caught 13 passes in that game. That's the most by a tight end in Kansas history. And with Lincoln's speed, he'd be a threat right away with the way that Kansas deploys its tight ends in the passing game. They'd be able to utilize him right now. Like you said, guy who can help you now, guy who can help you in the future. He'd be a perfect long-term fit as a receiving tight end next to current redshirt freshman Carson Brune, who's making a name for himself more as a blocker inline guy. That would be a terrifying tight end group. And with Kansas replacing Jalen Daniels after this year, Ryan, nothing makes a young quarterback happier than having a tight end that he can repeatedly find who's open. And I think Lincoln Kira could absolutely be that guy for the team.
Are you saying that maybe, as we go off script here, are you saying that maybe Lincoln's not being used properly at K-State?
That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm not putting that out there at all. As you said, no shade. I'm just saying, if Kansas is going to throw the ball to one guy 13 times, Lincoln could probably catch a few of them.
We can agree on this, that I would love to see Lincoln Kira involved in that offense a little bit more. If he's not ready for the rough and tumbleness that is K-State tight end world, he's a damn good receiver. You use him a little bit more, right?
Yeah, sure. As a big slot, you can use him in a lot of different ways. You can get him on the move as like an H-back. I think you can do a lot of different things there. Now, let's get to which player we would steal from the other team's recruiting class. Ryan, you swiped running back Corey Amakari, while I went with offensive lineman Justin Morales. What about Amakari stood out to you?
So again, I was trying to think about fits. I was trying to think about, a player that makes sense for K-State's style. And look, you think about Corey Amakari with K-State or picking up Katie Jones. It feels like maybe Amakari has been on the commitment list so long that like there's just kind of some luster that's been lost a little bit, right? Like KU fans maybe have gotten bored. It's like, oh, Katie Jones is the new shiny object. Well, here at K-State, we'll take you with open arms here, Corey Amakari. I love what I'm seeing from Corey Amakari. I think, look, Katie Jones has an element of explosiveness and the make you miss that is unlike any other. And so I think KU will be happy if I leave him be in Lawrence, and maybe I'll regret that decision. But I'm also thinking from a K-State point of view, like, you have a Devon Rice, you have a Montario Elston, you have at least for the time being a Dylan Edwards. Like there are those guys already on K-State's roster. What you need though still is, you've got Joe Jackson that can do a little bit of everything, but I still feel like moving forward, that every down back is still missing, right? And I think with Corey Amakari, you get a guy that is a legit 6 foot. He looks almost like 6'1" in his tape, and he's got bordering on 200 pounds already. I mean, he is chiseled up, and he's a guy that I think can be a first down back, second down back, possibly third down back. His senior tape showing a little bit more of him as a receiver, and he can go, Kevin. There's a little bit of make you miss. You can run in between the tackles. I think he would be a bell cow at K-State. I would gladly take him in this 2026 commitment class for the Wildcats.
Catches the ball really well, and not just out of the backfield, Ryan. They line him up actually as an outside receiver at times, and so he is a guy that has, a pretty versatile skill set. On Morales, I know he's a favorite of both of ours, but and I mentioned this earlier in the show, Ryan, but he's currently Kansas State's 7th ranked recruit and their 4th ranked offensive line commit. I think Morales could stick at tackle. He's got that long wingspan. I think he self-reports at just under 82 inches on that wingspan. But I really think all Big 12 potential at guard with that frame, with the athleticism, the mobility, the way that he moves. And the Kansas program could absolutely use another high-level young lineman to kind of toss into that room and develop. And if he's a tackle, great. If he moves into guard, fantastic. They could just use another guy in that group to pan out. I mean, it would not surprise me at all if he joined this class, Ryan. If you and I are sitting here with just a few more gray hairs around us in 3 years, and we're like, man, that Caden Snyder, Justin Morales duo, at tackle and guard is a really, really good one. So Morales was my pick, and I think he would be really good at Kansas.
I think that's interesting that neither one of us went with the top rated player in each class. And again, it's not to throw shade at, whether it's Tucker. I guess K-State's is a little bit less cut and dry. KU is JJ Dunnigan.
Yeah.
But I mean, I think it's easy to go with the talent there, but I think you and I did a good job though of finding somebody that fits a need for KU and K-State, not only in 2026, but beyond.
Look, trade talks are fun, but let's talk about something these teams actually can do realistically. And that's to find a realistic player available in the in-state class that we would like to see each school add. Both of us tried to keep this pretty real, so it wasn't like, hey, Ian Premer's available.
Right.
Let's go add that guy because he's not currently going to KU or K-State. Ryan, you picked show favorite Arlie Morrell of Pratt, and I went with another guy that we've talked about on the show a few times, in May's athlete, Braden Maivella. What about Arlie made you pick him for the Wildcats?
Well, yeah, we really tried to lock ourselves into some constraints here. They had to be from Kansas. They had to still be semi on the open market. Look, let's be honest. Arlie Morrell's committed to Colorado State, but the minute Jay Norvell decided to go elsewhere, I think that commitment probably becomes much softer. So we're going to consider him more on the market. And look, if honestly, Kevin, I think you would agree, you could swap these two players and both sides would still be very happy and still hit a need. But if we're talking about best available fit within Kansas that's still quote unquote on the market, I love Arlie Morrell. And we've been talking about this ad nauseum on the show. The minute KU and K-State lost Ian Premer, the focus for me would have turned very quickly to Arlie Morrell, even if he was still hard committed to Colorado State, because this is a player that I just feel like would embrace putting on a K-State jersey. I think he would be thrilled to stay at home. And I think he's got a lot of the similarities that you look for. If there's things that you liked about Ian, you might not get everything at that level as an Ian, but there's still so many similarities in their style that you get at Arlie. He's a 3-sport all-state level athlete in those 3 sports. And here's what else, Kevin. It's like Will Swanson is moving on.
Yep.
You've got Braden Lofton that's going to be a senior come next year. Garrett Oakley that's going to be a senior come next year. Will Swanson will be a junior. Lincoln Cure will be a sophomore. I think that with a guy like Arlie coming from that level at Pratt, there's no real pressure to get him on the field right away. You've got great experienced tight ends that he can learn from, that they can lead. So you don't have to rush him in. You give him that natural redshirt year that he's going to need. But then on top of that, Kevin, I think he's a guy that, again, can then pretty quickly get involved. And here's the other thing, Kevin. This allows you to move a guy like Lawson McGraw back to defense because, again, right now he's slated to be a tight end, which makes no sense to me. It's head scratching, but we've been here before with Gavin Hazelhorst at linebacker. But here's the thing. Again, I think there's right now what I'm gathering is there's not room for Arlie Morrell. They still would like to have a more natural opening scholarship at tight end, but look, he's good enough. He's worthy enough. He would absolutely bite. And so I would take him right now and figure all that other stuff out later. And even if it's just moving Lawson back to defense, I think that is an immediate solve that makes sense for all parties. So long-winded answer. there's a lot of reasons why if I'm K-State, I jump all over Arlie Morrell.
Ryan, both you and I are bourbon guys, and obviously, KCSN has a partnership with Ben Holiday, and you smell bourbon, and you get you get hints of this or whatever,
Right.
hints of Ian Premer,
Right?
And Arlie Morrell, right? Like if you drink it, you're not drinking but you're getting the hints of Ian Premer.
Well put.
Honestly, I like Arlie for both programs, like you said. I like Braden Maivella for both programs. He's a guy that plays quarterback for Mays, but projects as a wide receiver at the next level. I like Kansas's receiver class, like you said. I do like Tyron Parker's potential being that long outside receiver and the speed that Nate Sims and Corbin Glasgow bring. But we actually first saw Maivella at wideout when he was a sophomore and came away impressed. We were like, hey, who's that guy? And this is a guy who's one of the best basketball players in the entire state of Kansas. He's a big body guy at 6'3", 6'4", 205. And adding his combination of athleticism and body control to a guy that could be 6'4", 220 a year from now in the college weight room, that would make him such a tough matchup on the outside, who would be so equipped to win contested catches and just be a nightmare for teams that would wind up with, one-on-one coverage on the outside with him.
Yeah, well, and here's real quick, the other thing that I think is so awesome about the potential of a Braden Maivella is, you could make him like a Lamarck Brown. I mean, You see what he does at quarterback. Like, you could make him a running back on certain situations or a Wildcat quarterback. He would be tremendous. So, look, I get why a KU and a K-State are still kind of hesitant with a Braden Maivella. For KU, they don't really have a need for more receivers in this class. For K-State, they absolutely have a need for wide receivers in this class. They're offering them like hotcakes, and yet they won't offer Braden Maivella. I think it's because they view him probably as a little bit bigger project than they're willing to take on. But you and I have seen bits and pieces of him at receiver. And again, you're always going to be a kind of a program that emphasizes and embraces projects. And Kevin, now that we're creeping into close to November and he's still out there for the taking, if I'm either of these programs, I'm thinking, let's invest now for a potentially bright future to come.
Real quick, Ryan, huge recruiting weekend, by the way. Chance for Kansas, to get those guys into the new booth and make an impact. Also a chance for K-State to maybe steal a little bit of thunder if the Wildcats come in and knock over the Jayhawks trash cans. But you look at the top players in 2027 specifically, Cooper Ohnmacht will have his interview a little bit later in the show, talked about how he's going to be there. Gus Corsair planning to be there. A guy that I think is going to challenge both of them for the number one spot in the state in 2027, Tyson Ross, also planning to be there. And Ryan, we are filming this on Wednesday night. It's about 8:45 right now. We just got a text from our good friend James Tabor, Ross's trainer down in Wichita, Michigan, just came forward with an offer for Tyson Ross, who had Oregon and is really, maybe the fastest ascending prospect in the state. So a really big weekend from a recruiting standpoint at Sunflower Showdown as well.
Yeah, you mentioned some of those guys. Brody Fonensteel tells me that he will be in Lawrence. How about dipping into 2028? Remington Merlot is going to be on campus for this game as well out of Rose Hill, one of the leading guys in that class. And we were talking about 2026, right? And available guys outside of Arlie Morrell, who I kind of mentioned soft commit right now. But at least in terms of the verbal commitment KCSN top 10, here's one for you, Kevin. 2026 Max Robinson plans to be in Lawrence this weekend. So the best, at least on our board, the best available player still on the market in Kansas from Derby, offensive lineman, plans to be in Lawrence. This is a really, it's a big recruiting weekend every year. You always have the top kids in the state. But again, the way that kind of it feels like maybe going to be a slimmer margin of in-state guys in 2027 that makes sense for both of these. The four that you mentioned might be the leading four, and it might take a while for us to get beyond that. Making a critical impression here on some of these guys for 2027, and again, some of these 28s, is enormous this weekend for both KU and K-State.
Absolutely. After Great Bend's win over Hayes, we spoke with Ian Premer and Cooper Ohnmacht, each ranked as the top player in the state in their respective classes. Stick around for those interviews after the break.
Looking for tickets for your next event? Tickets for Less is your #1 source. Save big on every purchase when you use promo code KCSN at ticketsforless.com.
This is the Verbal Commitment Podcast on KCSN. Friday night, we went to the biggest game in the state with Great Bend taking down Hayes in a game that's probably a preview of a matchup we may get in the playoffs. We'll get to that game in just a minute. But first, on our way out there, we had a chance to visit Washburn, thanks to the
Bods.
the Bods hats or pots, as my high school coach used to call them. He used to always tell us to put our pots on whenever it was time to put helmets on. We had a chance to meet with the staff, see the planned facilities changes out there. Unbelievable stuff they have going on right now. So thanks to Coach Watkins and the Ichabod staff for throwing their doors open to us. We really appreciate it. Once we got to Hayes' new stadium, new facilities there as well, complete with Golden Q in our bellies. Ian Premer was as advertised, Ryan, and then some.
Yeah, I mean, he was, look, we hadn't seen him since camp settings, right, on either side. And you got to see him kind of in a non-padded setting at KU. I got to see him in a padded setting at K-State. But again, it's very much drill work. And a couple things with one-on-ones. This was our chance to finally see him do a little bit of everything. And let's be honest, I thought what we saw from him on defense, not that we think that's where he's going to play, right? But I mean, it's easy for a lot of guys to say I play both ways and actually play both ways, but like Ian's playing both ways. He's getting low to make tackles like as a 6'6" tight end. Kevin, he was bigger than I've ever seen him. He looked every bit the part of a kid that you would turn to somebody in the bleachers and go, yeah, that kid's going to Notre Dame. Like, it makes sense. The big question that I know everybody that's watching wants to know beyond, like, is he going to stay at Notre Dame? Like, yes. I think the other big question, though, that I keep getting is, how does he compare to Lincoln Cure?
Yeah.
Like, how does he compare to Desan Brame? And I think kind of sitting back and thinking on that, look, I still feel like Lincoln Cure from an athletic standpoint was a unicorn and is a unicorn. Top speed wise, if you had these guys race, Lincoln Cure is going to win every time. That's not to say that Ian is slow or Ian isn't mobile or agile like he is, but he's kind of a speed builder, long strides. Like, Lincoln is a track guy. And I think Lincoln's got a vertical leap that he makes a little bit more of like the dynamic play, a play that kind of pops and makes you go, wow. But if you kind of sit back and you just say, but who's the most well-rounded football player? Again, as seniors in high school, I think Ian is bigger. Ian is stronger, at least where we're seeing him right now, in terms of his blocking, in terms of how he utilizes his body, all these things. I think the IQ is probably up there for Ian. It's tough to say. We didn't get a chance to, see Lincoln a ton, but I mean, I would put Ian's IQ up there with just about anybody, and maybe Lincoln's would be too. But if you're telling me take the best all around football player, that again, ceiling and floor, I get why Ian Premer is thought of the way that he is. What do you think? Like, if you had a choice here amongst the three, and again, that feels like I'm underselling Desan Brame too, but I know it's easy he's the guy that left the state in terms of the two guys, and Ian's leaving the state, but in terms of right now, the two guys that are still in state, I get why there are a lot of folks that are starting to maybe lean Ian's way. Lincoln, the athlete, Ian, probably the football player, right?
Yeah. It's interesting because I think last year you had sort of Lincoln and Desan Brame on different poles, right? Like, Lincoln was the potential. He was the athleticism, the explosive athlete. Desan Brame was more of the classic inline tight end. I will block my face off and I will also catch passes type of deal. And I think, when we talked about it and said which of the two is more college ready, we said Deshaun Brain of those two. Ian's somewhere in the middle, but the crazy thing is, he's in the middle stretching towards both poles, right? Because he's super skilled. I think he's the most skilled of the three. I get your point about the IQ too. I think he picks things up incredibly quickly. Ian could have been a quarterback, like the way he sees things and analyzes things and breaks things down in real time. I think too, when you say Brame is this physical inline guy, I don't think Ian's that far off of that. I also don't think Ian's that far off of Lincoln on this side. And so you're kind of getting the best of both worlds, where he's not necessarily quite as much inline guy as Brame. He's not quite the athlete that Lincoln is. But I think when you look at it, he's got the complete package. I was surprised by how physical he was. And I don't mean that as a knock. I mean that as a pleasant surprise. The way that he was running through tackles, breaking tackles, the way he was hitting on defense. You really saw the physicality come out in a great way. And I keep thinking back, Ryan, you mentioned the fact that we saw him at camps. At KU camp, when I saw him, there was a back shoulder throw where he went back shoulder and toe tap both feet, and it would have been good in an NFL game. And he caught that, and I'm thinking, how many 6'6" tight ends, have the body control to get around on something like that, or the catch radius, or all of those different things. And so I think Ian's the most skilled, and I do think that he gives you a lot of what Brame gets, maybe not to the level that Brame does, and I think he gives you a lot of what Lincoln does, maybe not to the level there, but if you're asking between the three of them, he might be number one of those three because you aren't taking anything really off the table with him.
It's just crazy because, again, to wrap it up, the physicality, I think you nailed, because, again, it's not that we didn't think that he had a level of toughness and physicality to him, but this is a kid that was very basketball focused up until a year and a half ago, maybe 2 years ago. This is a kid that was playing virtually just a wide receiver in a lot of his sophomore and even junior tape. And now he's all over the field. He's coming down, making tackles, running downhill. He's running guys over. He's inviting contact. He's got a chance to be really good. And again, in a different way, I hate to do this to Ian. There's Travis Kelce to him in terms of Kelsey's not a guy that makes a ton of wow plays where he's running by guys. He can make you miss a little bit, but there's a steadiness to him, right? That he's always going to make a play, even if it is a tough catch or whatever. He can do it, even if it's not as electric as a Kyle Pitts or, somebody like that in terms of the speed and just the great length. But he's going to be dependable for the Notre Dame Fighting Irish.
Absolutely. Obviously, Ian was not the only player we got to see out there. We got to see some really good guys. I'm going to put you on the spot a little bit. Cooper Ohnmacht and Gus Corsair are currently sort of battling it out for that number one spot in 2027. I mentioned that Ross will probably get into that discussion as well. But what did you see from those guys? And did you come away feeling like one or the other was maybe a little bit ahead?
I think I came out thinking exactly the same as I did going in.
Yeah.
And again, it kind of goes back to some of the things I remember when we were talking about our debate of where to rank LaMarcus Barber versus Josh Galbraith, similar to that. And when I say that to say this, I know what Gus Corsair is, and I know what Gus Corsair is going to be. There is still an element of mystery and question for me with Cooper Ohnmacht. There were times that you saw the spark of the level of athlete that he is, right? He looks the part. I like the frame there. And there were times when you did get to see him, kind of make some yak on some plays on offense. But there were some other times where I saw him catch the ball and he's super smooth. But at the same time, I wanted that smooth to then turn into explosiveness. I wanted to stick the foot in the ground and freaking go. And maybe he was wanting some things to develop or kind of scanning the field using his vision, but I wanted him to go a couple times. And then on defense, I would have liked to have seen him take over. And again, maybe he's a guy that is very assignment sound. He doesn't want to get caught out of place just because I can be, or just, just because I can kind of make up for it with his athleticism. But again, I was expecting maybe him at times to take over a little bit more on defense and make more of an impact like we saw Ian Premer at times make on defense. But again, I get why maybe as a national recruiting service, you would lean more Cooper Ohnmacht because, again, if you miss on defense, you got him on offense. There's all this stuff that you can do in the return game.
Verified track
and field. Like, I get all of it. But Gus Corsair, to me, is dependable. We saw exactly what he is as an offensive lineman. He's rough. He's tumble. He understands leverage. He was a little bit more rectangular than maybe I remembered. Like, he is just a little bit more narrow in the shoulder, a little bit thinner. But again, we said that about Sam Hecht. Like, we've said that about Brock Heath. And at the end of the day, Sam Hecht is a guy that has started on K-State's offensive line for multiple years now. And Brock Heath was a guy that was considered maybe the best lineman on his team that included a 5-star like Andrew Babalola. But he was dependable. He was fundamentally sound. He was assignment sound. To me, that's what Gus Corsair is. Forget how big is he? How big can he get? I don't care. He's really good at what he does. So, long-winded answer, I came out the same, and that's not to say I'm higher or lower on either one. But again, if you're asking me to pick between the two in terms of a ranking, I would still have Gus Corsair edging out Cooper Ohnmacht right now. And again, that's not to say where Tyson Ross could be here in a couple of weeks when hopefully, fingers crossed, we get a chance to see him again in person.
Well, and it's a battle that's going to wage over the next year too. And so that's not to say that you didn't come out of it feeling one way, and a year from now, when you get a chance to see those guys, you might feel a little bit differently. I know we did come away really impressed with another pair of 2027s from that game. Cale Kern of Great Bend and Tanner Geist from Hayes.
Who do you want me to take? And then I want to hear kind of your thoughts on the other one. So lead me in. Who would you like to hear me talk about?
What I'd love to hear your take on Geist, because I feel like we talked a lot about Cale while we were watching the game.
Perfect. I'll take Geist. Honestly, I came away as impressed with him as anybody. Honest to God. I mean, Ian Premer, like, even Ian, you expected something from him, and even though he probably out-delivered even that, I thought Tanner Geist was more than I expected, and then some. Like, I thought we talked on the show last week about, how long is he? How big is he? If he is 6'2" or 6'1" and whatever in barefoot, he plays like he's 6'3". He plays like the length feels like he's a 6'4" guy. I thought he has a great frame with the ability to stack on good weight still. He is unbelievably powerful. I thought he did show a level of acceleration that I was hoping to see from him, a level of toughness. I came away thinking this is a no doubt FBS player with, again, we talked about on the show last week, maybe the ability to get to a Power 4. I feel like that's much more realistic after seeing him in person. And again, he's a guy that goes against Gus Corsair every single week. I think Tanner Geist is a player that more coaches need to know and need to be evaluating with a more keen eye, and not just, we think he's good enough, like, we should invite him to our camp. Like, no, I think this is a guy you really need to be starting to compare and contrast with other guys on your recruiting board, because I do think once one FBS offer starts to hit, the dominoes will start to fall as they watch the tape. It's really impressive. And when you see him in person, you're going to go, yeah, this is even more like a kid that we want.
You could tell the Kern brothers were brothers, right? In terms of the way that they were built, both of them were kind of blocky guys, and both of them played really well. Trenton Kern had a good game, but I think with Cale, we wanted to see the way that he moved, given that you watch him in pregame, you're kind of like, physically, he doesn't necessarily jump out the most. He's a little bit, I don't want to say short, but he's a little bit shorter than what you usually see from a linebacker type. And because he's squat, like, it makes him look like a little bit shorter maybe than he is when you're standing next to him. And then the whistle goes off. And Ryan, this guy can move for the way that he's built. And the other thing about it, we've talked about on the show how you watch a guy and he's a good athlete, but he's indecisive, right? And so he may run 4.5, but he plays 4.7. I don't know what Cale Kern's 40 time is, but if he's 4.7, he plays 4.5. He is decisive. He gets downhill. He smashes everything in his path. He's a guy that I am so interested to see on the camp circuit this summer, because I want to see the way that he moves in agility drills. I want to see the way that his body continues to mature and grow. They've got a really good weights program. They do a great job at Great Bend with those guys, and I think he's going to continue to get better from that standpoint. I'm also interested to get some stopwatches on it, because I may run a little bit better than the experts might think. But Ryan, you look at that Great Bend team, and the skill position talent is so outstanding. And you brought up Ian playing safety. Cooper was out at cornerback. You've got these guys on the back end. Hayes is a physical team, and Hayes struggled to run the ball consistently, in part because the Kerns were smashing their face mask into every run attempt. And so when you have a guy who's having that kind of impact like Cale was, he's a guy that I want to see a lot more of over the next few months, as opposed to some guys you see him and you're like, I kind of know what he is. I feel like there's still more that Cale Kern could show. And I say that after I thought he played a really tremendous game.
Well, and I was like, you go through pregame and you see Cale Kern, and first off, and this is interesting, these are kind of weird things that you and I and scouts will look at, is like, there's not a lot of facial hair there. And then you look at brother Trenton, who looks like he's 28. So you're going, like, again, to your point, like the body might not be done developing yet.
Sure.
And I say that because, again, kind of off the hoof, you're going, the body's interesting. You're thinking maybe once he gets into college, like they might try and shed some weight off. And then you see him move and you're like, well, that's not bad weight. Like he's running 4.5 out here. Like I was really impressed with him. We knew that he was tough, but you nailed it. How decisive he is and how accurate he is. He's not a guesser. He's seeing the play before it happens. He's beating guys to gaps and making the play over and over again. If you have Great Bend coming up on your playoff bracket, and granted, you're going to have to go to Great Bend, right? They're not coming to your place. But just forewarning, you're going to hear tackle on the play, Cale Kern, tackle on the play, Cale Kern, like over and over again. Again, Tanner Geist and Cale Kern, if they were not on your recruiting boards before, they absolutely should be now. And I'm talking FBS and probably maybe even some of our local Power 4 friends here that will be taking each other on this weekend.
Well, this week, Ryan, you and I will be splitting up again. Ryan will be sticking around Olathe to watch a 6-1 Olathe West squad take on a 5-2 Olathe Northwest team, albeit a game between two 5-2 teams, with Manhattan traveling to Washburn Rural. Ryan, you've been pumped for this game for like a week or two. I feel like, at least. What are you excited to see out of Olathe Northwest, Olathe West?
Well, like I said, we've kind of teed both of these teams up over the previous two shows because, we had Tyler Manzella as our player of the week 2 weeks ago. And then last week we talked a little bit more about Olathe West being my surprise squad. And so I won't dive too deep, but I just feel like this is long overdue. And these are two teams that it feels like when you have the type of seasons that they're having. And again, we've covered high school football in the area long enough to know that sometimes you just have really good, quote, high school football teams with maybe not a lot of guys that are going to go and play at the next level. But more often than not, it feels like when you've got a good team, there's got to be a player or two on these teams that maybe you and I have overlooked, or maybe we, the scouting industry hasn't given enough credit to. So, maybe it's a Bryce Randall, the running back for Olathe Northwest. Maybe it's Sam Kurskowski that we talked about last week, the receiver for Olathe West. I just feel like there's probably a diamond in the rough. And again, that's not to say, I know this is Sunflower Showdown episode, that's not to say K-State KU, but maybe there is somebody that just hasn't gotten out there with some other colleges, even down to, a D3 level that is playing in this game. I'm excited to finally kind of put a temperature, a barometer on both of these teams and figure out what is it that's really making them go, and are there any underclassmen on these teams that are helping to make them the teams that they are in 2025?
I'll try and keep mine pretty quick too. I'm excited because after getting to see one of our top 2 players in the state in Ian Premer a week ago, I get to see our other one in JJ Dunnigan. We currently have Dunnigan ahead in our KCSN rankings that we put out before the season. But after seeing Ian dominate the way that he did, I think JJ's got a tough battle to hold on to that number 1 spot. And he will face a stiff challenge in this one. That's such a good Manhattan team, facing a battle-tested Washburn Rural squad. Very good defense on that team. Very good quarterback, running back combo. John Hoytal's having a really good year. TJ Manikwu's a guy that we've talked about on the show, is also playing well. And so I'm looking forward to seeing that matchup in beautiful Topeka on Friday night.
Maybe get the Ichabods out there again with you.
There you go. Speaking of Ian Premer, we caught up with the Notre Dame commit after his 5-touchdown performance last Friday. Here's what he had to say. So, Ian, big win over Hayes. This is, maybe the biggest game in the state of Kansas this week. What kind of statement did you guys make?
Yeah, I think we're a great team. Hayes is a great team. It was a good game. We kind of pulled away late, but yeah, we didn't execute like we wanted to in the first half, and then we came out hot in the second half, and I think kind of ran away with it. You were about a toe away from a touchdown over here. We got a chance to see actually the photo of you coming in. But then you wind up getting 5 more. You get 3 as a runner. You get 1 as a receiver. You get 1 on a pick 6. Just describe your night tonight. Did it feel surreal at any point? Like, oh, my gosh, this is happening this way? Yeah, I think for me, when the atmosphere is like that and our whole team, it just kind of makes us play better. So I was just really excited. You don't get an atmosphere like this very often, so I do think it made me play better, especially in that second half. What were you thinking when Daxton dove in and got the pylon? That gets me more excited than anything. Your quarterback running through people, making plays. Yeah, I was pumped. I was sitting over here because I was a little tired, but I made sure to go over him and talk to him after. But yeah, nothing like a quarterback getting a rushing touchdown gets you excited. We got a chance to see your defensive physicality a little bit tonight. Is your physicality something that maybe you've developed over the last year or two? It has come a long way kind of as you've gotten bigger and stronger? Yeah, I think especially this past year, I made a focus to block better, and we didn't get to see a ton of that tonight, but I really focused on that. And then tackling, we know they're going to run the ball, so I think our coaches did a great job of playing us up a little more and said, you go tackle the run, so that's what I did. We actually haven't talked to you on the air since you picked Notre Dame, so why Notre Dame? Why did you pick the Fighting Irish? It was just it was just kind of surreal. Like really liked every time I visited, so they were the right spot for me. When you look at guys like Cooper kind of coming into his own, and he talks about, hey, I got to see Ian go through this process. I'm kind of following his lead. It feels like that means a lot to you. Yeah, I definitely. We got a lot of guys on this team who are really great football players and deserve the type of attention I'm getting. So I'm going to do anything I can to get them to the level that they truly deserve. So yeah, I definitely want to help them out in any way I can. Do you have a chance to head out and see any games here over the next few weekends? Yeah, I'm actually going up tomorrow for the Notre Dame USC game. Oh, that's going to be a good one. What are you looking forward to seeing? I'm just meeting with the coaches again and getting to experience that atmosphere.
I was going to ask you specifically, you were talking about bringing some guys up. Man, we loved what we saw to Cale Kern tonight. Can you describe just what you've seen from him and any tips that you can give him as he kind of starts his recruitment?
Yeah, he was hurt at the beginning of last year. I think kind of lingered on with his knee, but you've seen how he's playing this year. He's the type of linebacker. He just makes plays all over the place. Him and his brother so physical. I couldn't even imagine playing without those two at my middle linebackers. So both of those two I think could definitely play power forward football.
I wanted to ask you a question kind of for other recruits that have watched our show. You give a neat perspective, right, being the number 1 guy in the state and being from maybe a smaller community like Great Bend. What would be kind of your best advice for any recruits that watch our show, right, about how to attack the college recruiting process?
Yeah, I think kind of putting yourself out there, going to camps, trying to get yourself noticed, and then just balling out on Friday nights. That's what they pay attention to the most, so just do everything you can on a Friday night.
Also this past Friday, we spoke with Cooper Ohnmacht, one of the state's top players for 2027, both about the game and where his recruitment is at. As we mentioned earlier, he will be at the game we've spent so much time talking about this episode, in that Sunflower Showdown. And here's Cooper. Cooper, here we are right on the heels of a big win over Hayes. How does this one feel, especially with the rivalry aspect and the fact that you guys may be seeing this team again in the playoffs?
Yeah, I mean, they're a great team, obviously. We know we're a great team. Coming in, we knew we had to stop the run. Obviously, he got his yards or whatever. Lynn's a great player. They have a great O-line, obviously. But we kept our composure despite what the fans said, what the players were talking about. But yeah, we kept our composure and stuck together as a team.
Seemed like you guys got pretty excited when Daxton hopped in and got the pylon there at the end to kind of give you guys a little bit of space.
Yeah, I mean, as he likes to say, it was electric. O-line, keeping him clean, letting him get out of the pocket. So just great all-around teamwork once again.
And what did you think of Ian's performance tonight?
I mean, he's going to do what he's going to do. Can't really stop him. I mean, not much else to say other than you've got to rally to the ball, I guess. You can't stop him, really. So it's awesome to have someone like that as a teammate.
This is going to sound like a weird question, but is it a little bit frustrating for you when you're out, because you're a pretty physical guy, and you're out on a corner, a lot of the runs are going up the middle and everything. How tough is it to stay focused, I guess, when the ball's not necessarily coming your way on defense, but you know, hey, they could break this thing out here at any moment and I could be called on?
Yeah, so, I mean, obviously, I like playing in the box and stuff. Like, I went down as D-end at one point, made a big play, so that was really fun for me. But just knowing our coaches have a game plan, sticking to that game plan, knowing that they trust me whether I'm out on an island or playing linebacker. It just feels great to know that trust and connection is there.
Speaking of trust, they trusted you out on the edge as an offensive player, throwing the ball several times tonight. Was there something you guys liked about that look where you felt like maybe you could get some big plays out there?
Yeah, we just knew coming into it, obviously they trigger hard on me. They trigger hard on Ian. Just setting different plays up, allowing our playmakers to get the ball out in space is really, really awesome. I mean, obviously, I love having the ball in my hands. I wish I could always have it more, but yeah, it was awesome. So,
obviously, we're a recruiting show as well. How's that going for you? Have you had a chance to make some game day visits, and what's that look for you the next few weeks?
Yeah, I plan on going on a few more visits. Recruiting's starting to pick up quite a bit for me, so that's a great feeling. Although right now I'm pretty locked in on the season with the guys and our coaches and staff. But I've got some visits planned. I think I'm going to head up to KU versus K-State next weekend, and then I'll see about trying to get up to some more. So
awesome. So both KU and K-State have offered. What do you like about K-State at this point?
Obviously just the coaches. They obviously both teams, they recruit in-state kids hard. Both teams show great hospitality to me. Obviously, I love Brat. He's the kind of the head recruiting guy, and then I love Greg for KU. So they're both great guys, and they're both really good programs that I'm interested in.
KU, I know, wanted to see your first few games of the season before they extended an offer. When that offer came, what was that feeling like? What did they tell you that they liked about you from your first few games?
They said they love how physical I am. They think they can put me really anywhere on the field. When I did get the offer, I had to kind of pull to the side of the road. I was ecstatic over that. So it was a great feeling to finally get what I've been working for. And yeah, that's it really.
Your dad was a walk-on at K-State, is that right?
Yeah, so he went to K-State. He played 1 year, but when he kind of got his name called, he broke his neck. So Snyder told him he had to be done. So
did you grow up then maybe favoring one side or the other, or you just kind of enjoy watching college football from a local standpoint?
I mean, I just love football. I all teams. I like watching a lot of the Big Ten teams. Obviously, some of the bigger programs, Ohio State, Georgia, Alabama, they're just so fun to watch, but obviously I love both in-state teams. Obviously, they're close to home. I love being home, so that's awesome.
Is there a position that you feel more comfortable at, and have colleges talked to you about maybe specifically one side or the other, or are they leaving it more athlete for now?
Kind of leaving it more athlete, but I feel comfortable playing anywhere on the field really, and know that when I get to college, obviously I'm going to be a much better player and develop, so that's really comforting for me. So,
last but not least, what's going to be your takeaway from watching Ian go through this process? Is there something that you've kind of picked up and learned from him about, like, yeah, maybe I can handle mine in a similar fashion?
Yeah, obviously he helps me with many things. Helping me decide on what to really look for in a program. Obviously him and his journey is awesome, so I can kind of look at him, base my recruiting process off that, and look for what he kind of looks for in a school, because I mean he's a great kid. He knows a lot about this stuff, so I trust him.
That was Great Ben's Cooper Ohnmacht, and this has been the Verbal Commitment Podcast on KCSN. Thanks to all of you for following along. If you enjoyed what you saw or heard, leave us a comment or review, like this video, subscribe here on YouTube, or hit us with a 5-star rating if you're listening on an audio platform. And until next time, we'll see you on the trail, and take care.